Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. Commander James Reeves stood at the viewport of Space Station Horizon, watching the iridescent rings of Neptune shimmer in the distance. After 15 years in the Interstellar Security Force, he thought he'd seen everything the cosmos had to offer. He was wrong. The station's warning systems blared to life, startling him from his contemplation. A sleek vessel approached, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. "The Nova have arrived, Commander. The diplomatic delegation is requesting permission to dock," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from her station. "Their ambassador's biosignatures are unusual." James straightened his midnight blue uniform. "Unusual how?" "They're in some sort of biological transition phase. The medical team is requesting additional containment protocols." He'd been briefed about the Nova, an advanced species whose biological cycles made them uniquely dangerous during certain phases. Their civilization's technological achievements had earned them a place at the diplomatic table, but their unpredictable nature made them challenging allies. The docking procedure went smoothly despite James's concerns. As the airlock cycled, he found himself face to face with Ambassador Lyra Visari. Her appearance took his breath away. Alabaster skin with subtle patterns that shifted like northern lights, eyes the color of distant galaxies, and hair that seemed to capture starlight itself. "Commander Reeves," she greeted him, her voice carrying harmonics that made his spine tingle. "Your station's reputation for hospitality precedes you." "Ambassador Visari," he replied, maintaining professional composure despite the strange effect her presence had on him. "Welcome to Horizon, though I must address the medical team's concerns about your current biological state." A slight smile played across her ethereal features. "Ah yes, the awakening phase. Your scientists needn't worry, I have it under control." She stepped closer, and James caught a hint of an otherworldly scent that made his head swim. "Though I should warn you, Commander, your species has an interesting effect on us during this time." Chief Medical Officer Hassan approached, scanner in hand. "Ambassador, if you'll permit me to take some readings. Standard protocol for all new species interactions." Lyra gracefully submitted to the examination, though her gaze remained fixed on James. The scanner's readings made Hassan's eyebrows rise. "These pheromone levels are unprecedented, Commander. I strongly recommend implementing additional security measures." "That won't be necessary," Lyra interjected. "I assure you I maintain perfect control over my biological responses." The patterns on her skin shifted faster, betraying her words. James should have listened to Hassan's warning, should have implemented those security measures, should have remembered the briefing about Novari biology. But something about Lyra's presence made rational thought increasingly difficult. The following days brought a flurry of diplomatic meetings, cultural exchanges, and security briefings. James found himself constantly in Lyra's orbit, drawn by an attraction he couldn't explain. Her species' advanced technology could revolutionize human space travel, but every interaction felt charged with unspoken tension. Late one night, as artificial darkness fell over the station, James received an urgent message. Ambassador Visari requested his presence in the diplomatic quarter. Protocol dictated he should send a security team, but something compelled him to go alone. He found Lyra in her quarters, the room bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent Novari crystals. Her formal diplomatic attire had been replaced by flowing robes that seemed to merge with the shifting patterns on her skin. "Commander," she said softly, "I apologize for the late hour, but there's something you need to understand about my people." She moved closer, and that intoxicating scent filled his senses again. "During the awakening, we seek out those whose essential frequency matches our own. It's rare, nearly impossible to find such alignment with other species yet." James felt his heart racing. "Yet your presence disrupts every measure of control I spent centuries perfecting. The warnings about human compatibility weren't just diplomatic courtesy. They were for our protection, both of us." He should have left then, should have remembered his duty, his position, the delicate diplomatic balance at stake. Instead, he took a step closer. Protection from what? Lyra's eyes seemed to contain entire nebulae as she looked up at him. From this, she whispered, closing the distance between them. The moment their lips met, James understood why the warnings existed, why protocols were in place, why some boundaries weren't meant to be crossed. But it was too late. As starlight streamed through the viewport and the station hummed around them, James Reeves and Lyra Visari crossed a line that would change human-Novari relations forever. Neither of them could have predicted the consequences that would unfold from that single moment of weakness. The morning after their encounter, Space Station Horizon Systems detected unusual energy fluctuations throughout the diplomatic quarter. James Reeves stood in the control room, trying to focus on the readouts, while his mind kept drifting to the events of the previous night. His skin still tingled where Lyra had touched him. "Commander, we're picking up some strange biometric readings," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, her dark eyes narrowing at her console. "They seem to be emanating from both the ambassador's quarters and you, sir." James cleared his throat, adjusting his collar to hide the faint luminescent marks that had appeared on his neck. "Forward the data to medical, and Lieutenant, keep this between us for now." But secrets were hard to keep on a space station. Within hours, Chief Medical Officer Hassan requested an urgent meeting with both James and Lyra. The doctor's usually calm demeanor showed signs of stress as he reviewed the scanner readings. "This is unprecedented," Hassan said, packing his office. "Commander, your cellular structure is showing signs of adaptation to Novari biochemistry, and Ambassador Visari, your awakening phase has intensified rather than diminished as expected." Lyra sat perfectly still, but the patterns on her skin swirled with increased velocity. "Among my people, such adaptation only occurs when—" She paused, meeting James's gaze. "When a permanent bond begins to form." "A bond?" James leaned forward. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means, Commander, that our biological compatibility runs deeper than anyone could have predicted. The warnings about human-Novari interaction weren't just about physical attraction. They were about preventing irreversible biological changes." Hassan's medical scanner beeped insistently. "Ambassador, your pheromone levels are rising again. Commander, I'm detecting corresponding changes in your neurochemistry. This could compromise both of your abilities to perform your duties." "I won't compromise anything," James insisted, even as he felt the pull toward Lyra strengthening. "We can handle this professionally." But professionalism became increasingly difficult as the days passed. During diplomatic meetings, James found himself hyper-aware of Lyra's every movement. The subtle shift of her crystalline jewelry, the way her hair captured different wavelengths of light, the melodic undertones in her voice that seemed meant only for him. The situation came to a head during a crucial negotiation session with the Novari delegation. James stood at attention behind the human diplomatic team, while Lyra represented her people's interests. As she discussed the terms of a potential technology exchange, the patterns on her skin began to pulse in sync with James's heartbeat. "The neural interface technology we're offering," Lyra was saying, her voice steady despite the visible evidence of their connection, "could revolutionize your space exploration capabilities. However, we have concerns about potential biological complications." "What kind of complications?" Admiral Chen, the head of the human delegation, asked. Lyra's eyes briefly met James's. "Our technology operates on principles of biological resonance. Recent events have shown that humans may be more susceptible to these resonances than previously thought." The implications hung heavy in the air. James watched as understanding dawned on the Admiral's face. Before anyone could respond, the station's emergency alerts blared to life. "Unidentified vessels approaching," Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came over the comm. "They're not responding to hails, and their weapon signatures match known pirate configurations." James moved to leave, but Admiral Chen's sharp voice stopped him. "Commander Reeves, given your condition, perhaps you should remain here while security handles this." "With all due respect, Admiral, I'm still the head of station security." James straightened, forcing himself to focus past the pull of Lyra's presence. Ambassador Visari, please remain here with the diplomatic team. No, Lyra rose, her diplomatic robes shimmering with each movement. My people's defensive capabilities might be needed. And Commander, the patterns on her skin aligned into sharp angular formations. Our bond could be an advantage rather than a liability. What followed was unlike any combat situation James had ever experienced. As pirates attempted to breach the station's defenses, he found himself operating in perfect synchronization with Lyra. Through their growing bond, he could anticipate her actions before she made them. Her Novri technology, integrated with his tactical experience, turned them into an unstoppable force. The arrival of the Nova High Council delegation transformed Space Station Horizon's usually orderly atmosphere into barely contained chaos. James watched from the security office as 3 crystalline ships, each more magnificent than the last, docked at the station. Their presence wasn't a diplomatic courtesy, it was an intervention. "They're here about us, aren't they?" he asked Lyra, who stood beside him, her usual ethereal grace tensed with anxiety. The patterns on her skin had formed into sharp geometric shapes that he'd learned indicated distress. "The Council doesn't approve of uncontrolled variables," she replied, her voice carrying undertones of worry that only he could detect. "Our bond, it challenges everything they believe about controlled evolution." Before James could respond, his communicator chirped. "Commander," Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice was tense. "The Nova delegates are requesting immediate access to Medical Bay. They've brought their own scientists." Chief Medical Officer Hassan was already waiting when they arrived at Medical Bay, his expression grave. The Novri delegation swept in like a wave of living crystal, their formal attire making Lyra's diplomatic robes look modest in comparison. Leading them was High Counselor Vexa, her ancient eyes holding galaxies of knowledge and judgment. "Ambassador Visari," Vexa's voice resonated at frequencies that made the medical equipment hum, "you have created quite the situation." Her gaze shifted to James. "And Commander Reeves, the human who's managed to trigger unprecedented biological changes in one of our most promising diplomats." When the last pirate ship retreated, leaving only debris and defeated boarders behind, James and Lyra stood in the security office, both breathing heavily from the encounter. The physical exertion had intensified their connection, making it almost impossible to maintain professional distance. "Well," Admiral Chen said from the doorway, having witnessed their extraordinary coordination, "I believe we need to have a serious discussion about the future of human-Nova relations." His stern expression softened slightly. "And perhaps revise our protocols about interspecies relationships." As the Admiral left, James turned to Lyra. The combat-sharpened patterns on her skin slowly settled into softer waves. "We can't keep pretending this isn't happening," he said quietly. "No," she agreed, reaching for his hand. Where their skin touched, a soft glow emanated. "But perhaps we were meant to be the first to show both our peoples what's possible when we stop fighting our natural connections." Neither of them could have known that their next challenge would come not from external threats, but from within the very institutions they served. The bond between them was about to shake the foundations of both their civilizations. "High Counselor," James stepped forward, maintaining his military bearing. "Whatever concerns you have about our relationship." "Concerns?" Vexa interrupted. "We're far beyond concerns, Commander. We're dealing with a biological phenomenon that could either advance both our species or destroy them." She gestured to her team of scientists. "You will both submit to immediate examination." The following hours were a blur of tests, scans, and increasingly alarmed discussions among the Novri scientists. James watched as they examined the luminescent patterns that had begun appearing on his skin, marks that mirrored Lyra's own biological signals. Meanwhile, Lyra's awakening phase showed no signs of diminishing, instead evolving into something entirely new. "Fascinating," one of the Novri scientists muttered, reviewing the results. "The human cellular structure is incorporating Novri characteristics, while Ambassador Visari's biochemistry is adapting to maintain the connection. It's like watching accelerated evolution in real time." Hassan, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. The changes aren't just superficial. Their neural patterns are synchronizing. During the recent security crisis, they demonstrated levels of coordination that should be impossible between different species. High Counselor Vex's expression darkened. Then it's worse than we feared. This bond isn't just biological, it's reaching into quantum layers of consciousness if it continues. She turned to Lyra. You understand what this means, child, the potential dangers. The only danger, Lyra replied, her voice carrying a strength James had never heard before, is in refusing to accept evolution. Our peoples have been searching for ways to bridge our differences. Perhaps this is how it begins. Or perhaps, a new voice interjected, this is exactly what we've been waiting for. Admiral Chen entered Medical Bay, accompanied by a team from Earth's Xenobiological Research Division. Our long-range sensors detected the Council ships, he explained. Given the situation, Earth Command thought it prudent to send our own experts. The tension in the room shifted as human and Novri scientists began sharing data, their initial suspicion giving way to professional curiosity. James and Lyra found themselves at the center of intense scientific debate, their every biological response scrutinized and analyzed. The implications are staggering, one of the Earth scientists announced. If we can understand how this bond forms, it could revolutionize our approach to interspecies relations. Imagine biological compatibility where we thought none could exist. But not everyone shared this enthusiasm. James noticed some of the Novri Council members exchanging worried glances. High Counselor Vex's voice cut through the scientific discussions like a blade. You're all missing the critical point, she declared. This bond isn't just changing them, it's changing faster than we can study it. And anything we can't control, she fixed her ancient eyes on Lyra, is a threat to the careful balance we've maintained for millennia. The patterns on Lyra's skin flared with emotion, and James felt an answering resonance in his own newly altered cells. Through their strengthening bond, he could sense her mounting frustration and fear, not for herself, but for the future their connection represented. Balance, Lyra challenged her superior. Or stagnation. Our people seek understanding of other species, yet we fear any true connection with them. Commander Reeves and I may be the first to experience this bond, but I doubt we'll be the last. James stepped closer to her, their proximity causing the luminescent patterns on both their skin to synchronize. Whatever you decide, he addressed both the Council and Earth Command, you should know that this bond isn't something that can be undone. We've tried fighting it. The more we resist, the stronger it becomes. Admiral Chen studied them thoughtfully. Perhaps that's precisely why it happened. Sometimes the universe has its own plans, regardless of our protocols and prejudices. As the debates continued around them, James and Lyra shared a silent moment of understanding. Their personal connection had become something far larger than themselves, a catalyst for change that would reshape the relationship between their species forever. But with that knowledge came a new fear. What would those who feared such change be willing to do to stop it? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected, and it would test not just their bond, but everything both humans and Novri believed about their place in the universe. The attempt to separate them came without warning. James woke in the middle of the station's artificial night to find his quarters swarming with Novri security forces, their crystalline armor refracting emergency lighting in dazzling patterns. Through the bond, he felt Lyra's panic before he heard her voice. This is for your own protection, both of you, High Counselor Vexa announced from the doorway. The bond is progressing too rapidly. Our scientists have detected quantum instabilities that could threaten the entire station. James fought against the restraining field they directed around him, his newly altered biology reacting violently to the separation from Lyra. You're lying, he managed through gritted teeth. The only instability you're afraid of is political. Through the chaos, Dr. Hassan burst in, medical scanner already active. What are you doing? Their physiological systems are completely intertwined now. Forcing them apart could kill them both. Better 2 casualties than risking both our species, one of the council members declared coldly. The human cellular structure is already 30% converted to novel patterns. If this continues, neither species will remain pure. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm system. Commander, we've got multiple unauthorized power surges throughout the station. Something's interfering with our core systems. James could feel it through his connection to Lyra. The station's technology was responding to their combined distress. The Nover's biological technology and the station's human engineering were resonating with their bond, creating unprecedented reactions. "Stop this," Admiral Chen commanded, arriving with a team of Earth security forces. "You're violating every diplomatic protocol we've established." But the High Council remained unmoved. "Protocol becomes irrelevant when facing extinction," Vexa replied. "Their bond is just the beginning. If others follow their example, the biological distinction between our species will blur until neither truly exists. Everything we've built, everything we are, will be lost." The restraining field suddenly flickered as the station's artificial gravity wavered. James felt Lyra's consciousness brush against his, stronger than ever despite their physical separation. Through their connection, he understood what was happening. Their bond had evolved beyond simple biology. "You're wrong," Lyra's voice rang out, her tone carrying harmonics that made every crystal in the room vibrate. "This isn't about losing who we are. It's about becoming more." The patterns on her skin began to pulse with increasing intensity, matching the rhythm James's heart had adapted to. Hassan's medical scanner started beeping frantically. Their quantum signatures are aligning. The station systems are somehow responding to their combined frequency. The lights flickered as energy cascaded through the station systems. James felt power flowing through circuits and crystals alike, all of it resonating with the unique frequency their bond had created. Through their connection, he and Lyra were bridging not just their species but their technologies. "This is what we've been afraid to see," Lyra continued, her form beginning to glow with accumulated energy. "Our peoples weren't meant to remain separate. We've been evolving toward each other since our first contact." Admiral Chen stepped forward, his expression filled with wonder. "The station, it's not malfunctioning. It's adapting just like they are. Their bond isn't just changing them, it's showing us a new way for our technologies to work together." The Novary scientists' instruments were registering readings that defied their understanding. The quantum harmonics created by James and Lyra's bond had catalyzed something unprecedented, a fusion of human innovation and Novary biological technology. "Don't you see?" James addressed the council, his voice carrying the same harmonic undertones as Lyra's now. "Your fears of losing yourselves are based on seeing change as destruction, but what's happening here isn't about loss, it's about growth." The station systems stabilized at a new frequency, one that accommodated both human and Novary technology in perfect synchronization. The restraining field dissolved as the power found a new equilibrium, and James immediately moved to Lyra's side, where their hands met, energy crackled visibly. High Counselor Vexa watched in silence as her worst fears transformed into something she hadn't considered: hope. The very changes she'd fought to prevent were revealing possibilities her people had never imagined. "Perhaps," she finally said, her ancient eyes reflecting the glow emanating from the bonded pair, "it is we who must adapt now. The universe seems to have made its choice, regardless of our wishes." But even as understanding dawned among the leadership of both species, James and Lyra knew through their bond that this was just the beginning. The true test would come not from those who feared change, but from the change itself. Their transformation was still progressing, leading them, and their peoples, toward a future none of them could fully comprehend. 6 months after the confrontation on Space Station Horizon, the facility had become something entirely new. Where once stark dividing lines separated human and Novary sections, now organic crystalline growths merged seamlessly with traditional human architecture. The station itself had evolved, much like its inhabitants. James stood in the newly created integration chamber, watching as another human Novary pair underwent compatibility testing. The patterns on his skin, now a permanent feature, shifted in response to the energy in the room. Through their bond, he felt Lyra's approach before she appeared. "The fourth successful pairing this month," she noted, her voice carrying both pride and wonder. The Council's worst fears became their greatest hope. Dr. Hassan, who had become the leading expert on human ovary biology, reviewed the latest data on his enhanced medical scanner, itself a hybrid of both species technology. "The genetic resonance is becoming more stable with each new pair. Your breakthrough paved the way for a more controlled transformation process." Controlled being the keyword, Admiral Chen added, joining them. The Admiral had become one of their strongest advocates after witnessing the benefits of their combined technologies. The panic over species purity has given way to excitement about the possibilities. The station's new status as a center for human ovary integration had transformed it from a simple diplomatic outpost into the most important facility in known space. Teams of scientists from both species worked together, studying the remarkable changes that occurred when compatible pairs formed bonds. "High Counselor Vex's latest report is encouraging," Lyra said, pulling up a holographic display that floated between crystalline formations. "The quantum stability theories she proposed are proving accurate. Each new bonded pair adds to the overall harmony." James felt a surge of emotion through their connection, pride mixed with lingering amazement at how far they'd come. "Remember when they thought our bond would destroy both species?" He reached for her hand, watching as their matching patterns synchronized. "Instead, it showed us all a new way forward." Lieutenant Rodriguez, whose station had evolved into a biological digital hybrid interface, called their attention to an incoming transmission. "The first deep space expedition team is reporting in. You'll want to see this." The holographic display shifted to show a vast starfield, but not as human eyes normally perceived it. Through the enhanced perception granted by human ovary bonds, new layers of reality became visible. Quantum pathways between stars shimmered like gossamer threads, revealing navigation routes that neither species could have detected alone. "The combined crews are performing beyond all expectations," the expedition commander reported, her own skin showing the beginning patterns of a ovary bond. "We're mapping quantum corridors that could revolutionize space travel. The ship itself seems to be evolving with us, adapting to our enhanced capabilities." Admiral Chen nodded in satisfaction. "The Joint Fleet Command will be pleased. We've already got plans for expanding the program, assuming the Council approves, of course." "They'll approve," Lyra assured them, her patterns shifting to display her confidence. "They've seen enough to understand that this isn't about losing our identities. It's about transcending our limitations." James felt a subtle shift in the station's ambient energy, another systems integration completing itself. What had once been separate technologies now functioned as a single living entity, just as he and Lyra had become something greater than the sum of their parts. Their civilizations were growing into something new and wonderful. "We're getting requests from other species now," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. "The Centurions are particularly interested in the possibility of similar bonds." "One step at a time," James cautioned, though he couldn't help but smile. "We're still learning what we can become ourselves." That evening, as the station's lighting shifted to simulate dusk, James and Lyra stood at their favorite viewpoint. The patterns on their skin glowed softly, creating intricate designs in the reflected glass. Beyond the station, stars beckoned with new possibility. "Do you ever regret it?" Lyra asked suddenly. "That night when you forgot to lock your door, all the changes it led to." James turned to her, seeing in her iridescent eyes the same wonder he had experienced during their first meeting. "The only thing I regret is that we ever tried to fight it. Some changes aren't meant to be resisted." Their bond, they shared not just thoughts and feelings, but a vision of the future, one where the boundaries between species became opportunities rather than barriers. Their story had become legend among both their peoples, a testament to the power of embracing the unknown. "The Council wants us to oversee the expansion program," Lyra said softly. "New stations, new crews, new bonds forming will be shaping the future of both our species." "Not just our species," James replied, gesturing to the stars. "What we discovered here, what we became together. It's bigger than humans or Novari. We've shown the galaxy that evolution doesn't have to end with biological maturity, that love in all its forms can transform reality itself.